A special welcome which we would like to extend to all of you. And this is coming to you courtesy the DEI committee of Lalit. So I'll invite them, please join us forward and kindly extend this special welcome. But first, let's welcome them with a huge big round of applause. May I invite on stage Ms. Kanta Singh, Deputy Country Representative, India, UN Women. Let's welcome on stage Ms. Eittee Gupta, Head, Public Affairs, Ranstad, India. We have with us today Ms. Asha Kharga. She is formerly Vice President, Chief Customer and Brand Officer at Mahindra Group and also the Group Executive Board Member, M&M. Let's warmly welcome in our midst Shubhrata Prakash, IRS, Commissioner of Income Tax, author and mental health advocate. Joining us in this panel, Poonam Tyagi, General Manager, Corporate Human Resources, the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group. And this afternoon, they are all sharing this conversation with Preeta Atre. She is co-founder, Tap-In, and formerly marketing director of Twitter APAC.
Thank you so much. Post-lunch panels, I always dread. Everyone must be on a full stomach, but I'm sure all of us are geared up for the challenge to keep you all engaged. I think this is one topic which is very close to my heart. It's something that we're very passionate about, and how do we actually bring about a change? And I believe every discussion and every step that we take is a step forward. So thank you so much for my panelists over here. And before we actually get into the topic at hand, since morning we've heard a lot of numbers and stats, and I'd like to kind of add some more. We did hear Dr. Reddy speak about the fact that if we actually have gender parity at the workforce equal to the number of men, we can add 28 trillion to the GDP. That's not a small number. So when we say, does diversity, equity, and inclusion make business sense? If this number doesn't drive us to it, then I don't know what will. We also know that organizations have invested, are investing, and are moving forward, but the progress has not been at a pace that we would like it to be. Amrita did say that today morning. Studies say that it could be between 100 to 150 years before we actually hit gender parity, and I think that's too long a wait for all of us, so we need to see much more progress. So if we look at all of this, and we know that organizations are willing to invest, are willing to learn, what is it that we can do? What are the best practices that we can actually imbibe and share so that the learning process is faster? So I'm going to kind of first come to Ms. Kanta Singh. How have you seen, basis your experience, in promoting gender equality and women's rights, how have you seen organizations benefit from this? And more importantly, what is it that they have done, and what is it that they should be doing?
Thank you, Preeta. And you just mentioned before I start speaking that what's the benefit of having more women in leadership, and not only leadership at every stage. But इतने सन्नाटे के साथ बात करने में मुझे घबराहट होगी. Issue इतना serious topic है, लेकिन हमें इतना serious होने की आवश्यकता नहीं है. Why I feel that is that each one of us who's sitting here in this room has a role to play in actually achieving some of the things that we're talking about. I've been in this space for 30 years now, and I've been listening to these statistics and have been reading about these for donkey's years now. But it doesn't mean that things have not changed. Things have changed a lot. So first, three things that I always talk about. One is people who worked before us. So grateful for their contribution to where we are sitting today. It was impossible to think about hundreds of women sitting in a hall particularly in a 5-star hotel, talking about women's leadership. It was hugely difficult. We used to meet in grounds, we used to meet in rallies, we used to meet in very normal, ordinary places, dharamshalas and schools and colleges. So we have achieved something, that's number one. And we have achieved because some people have sacrificed. What is it that we are doing for the next generation? And there also not that we have been sitting quietly, all of us who are sitting here and many of us who are not there have been working and raising voices and policies, and they're contributing to policies that can lead for a better future for young women who are going to be taking over leadership. Third is the role of organizations and governments, which can also bring in favorable policies for women to be in the leadership position. Of course, there's a long way to go, and we need to do something about it right now. So I will talk about 4 different things. One is, if you look at the picture across, I mean, good practices I'll talk about later, but look across India. In Supreme Court, there were 3 women judges. There are going to be 2 now, and there's going to be 1 coming up later. So not very high representation. 14%, 14 plus in the parliament. The global figure is 26%. The corporate sector, you know better than I do. What is the need, what is the status? 40% women join in the IT workforce. And when they reach a certain level, they start dropping out, and in the leadership position, not more than 7%. And that is the story across. So where are women? Women, not that women are not working, what are they doing? They're working in low-paying jobs. They're working in group activities. They're working in very, very low visibility areas, Asha workers, Anganwadi workers, women in SSGs, women in the frontline health work. So women are sweating it out, but they're not counted even workers. So that is one, how do we define work? Secondly, their voices are not represented. So when we are working in companies, we see many women entering the office in the morning. But do they get heard? No, they don't. Because there are not enough women in the leadership roles. And people who are working in corporate sector will see, if you come to UN Women, there are 80% women working there. So I'll see, oh, there's no problem, women. There are women around here. But we see very closely, we don't see, look at the bigger picture. And why do we miss women? Because people like us who are working, we need support. We need allies. We need somebody who understands my pain, who understands what it takes to leave a small, sick child at home to come to office that day because there's a board meeting and I have to take notes. We understand that pain. So that's how we need women. How it impacts companies is there are multiple ways. One is it's a matter of human rights. We are 50%, we need to be represented at 50% level. Second is companies benefit from diverse perspectives. What a man talks, a woman talks differently. I have different life experiences. And all companies are either providing services or they are into bigger infra on those manufacturing kind of projects. Everything, there's not even a single thing that doesn't impact women. Whether it is tractors, or it is public transport, or it is roads, whatever you just can think of, everything, even the space. So the cloud computing and whatnot, everything has an impact on women and children. So if women and children are going to be impacted, why don't we include them in the decision making? And that's why companies don't benefit from that. When Google talks about AI, the first line of thinking is the AI in the assistant that Sundar Pichai presented that day was a woman. Fix my haircut. Fix an appointment for my haircut. I said, what? If AI is also going to bring in the same biases that human mind had, it's primarily because the AI is also being designed by men. So we need to correct that imbalance within the company. So, and the leadership will be better informed if they take into perspective and take into account the different viewpoints of men and women. So, and also then of course it will have improved services, it will have improved products, it will have improved impact, it will have improved impact on the community at large. That's how it's very important, and of course there will be more profits. And I'll just give you a small example. I know I'm taking a little longer. A small example, I don't know how many of you know Deepika Jindal ji. Deepika ji took a small risk. She runs a RD Knox brand, is her brand, and she has a steel factory in Haryana, 700 male employees for last many years before we started interacting with her. She was very open to the idea. She says, yeah, of course, it's still stainless steel, but I can think of bringing more women. So first thing she did was she invested. So what can companies do? I just wanted to come to that. She invested about 1 crore rupees to introduce the idea of bringing more women there in the factory. And manufacturing is the last place where women were not there and are not represented fairly. So she invested in their training on the campus. So half day the girls will be trained on theory, and then they'll go to the shop floor and will start learning how to make those utensils that they're making for foreign markets. Over a long story short is, over a period of 1 year, we were able to bring in about 100 women. Because they put in some money, they were ready to change their rules, they were ready to hire these girls, give them at least a 1-year contract. After a year, 100 women stayed there. They also, on our advice, she also allowed us to train the middle managers, because they were the ones who were creating most problems. They were not ready to change their language on the shop floor. With boys, they can abuse. With girls, they can't do this. They could walk a certain way, with girls, they can't do. So all that kind of training happened on the shop floor for all kinds of managers. As a result, her profits in 11 years of the existence of the factory increased by 15%. She was very, very encouraged. So, because the girls ensured the quality that men could not have an eye for. And they brought in more discipline on the shop floor. You know the reasons why. Absenteeism reduced, the language improved, the behavior improved, the fights decreased. Men used to fight with each other. Because there were women around, they didn't want to fight, they didn't want to show themselves to be the troublesome people. Next year, the profits increased more. And now she's committed, of all those people, 65 of them are still working, because her factory size has reduced otherwise overall. But all of them have become supervisors, because they learned so fast. So companies benefit, companies' profit motive is, that's unquestionable, and that is how it works. So it makes perfect business sense for companies to hire women and retain them, and also bring them at leadership level. And there are enough examples in the world that show that productivity level increases when women are there. So I'll stop here, but.
No, but thank you so much for that. And I completely echo the point that it's not just bringing women into the workforce, but it's important to invest in them and create that environment for them to grow and thrive, which is going to be even more important. We also know, this is a very interesting piece that I found, that the Credit Suisse Research Institute found that companies with more women in their boards have a higher ROI, better than average growth than companies with only male members. But though the numbers prove that having women is more beneficial even in terms of revenue, we only have the S&P 500 only has 2% more than 50 board members. It's 2% companies with more than 50 board members. So we've still got a long way to go, but I think the future is bright. So with that, Asha, I'm going to come to you. What are some common challenges that organizations face while implementing diversity and inclusion initiatives, and how do you feel that these challenges can be overcome?
It's a very good question, especially for a manufacturing company which makes SUVs. the Thar, the XUV 700, the Scorpio N. So I want to dial back and just tell you about two dimensions. The first dimension is manufacturing itself. Manufacturing as an industry has its own barriers because you're creating products like these. You're creating tractors, you're creating automobiles, heavy machinery. And the second dimension is, from a social point of view, girls themselves don't want to come and join the industry. How many parents really are attracted to the automobile business versus advising their daughters to go into IT or banking or services? वो अच्छा job है, factory में मत जाना, office में जाना. So that is a predominant social barrier which prevents women from coming into factories, and we have tackled it at two levels. So firstly, we are on a journey. I think from where we started to where we are today, there has been significant momentum, and actually I feel most bullish when Kanta spoke about it. I feel most bullish about diversity because I think we're at the right time. 10 years ago, when you went into, say, a small town in UP, you went to a Rai Bareli or you went to a Kanpur, women or rather parents of young girls would hesitate sending their girls out of cities. But today, actually, they're quite open. I really see the difference. They want their daughters to go. They understand the role of an additional income that comes in, because when women work, actually the quality of life of a family improves, and as a result, society improves. So just coming back to what we did two things. One is we started recruiting women at two levels. If you look at the vehicles today, it's literally like software on wheels. So the XUV 700 has 16 million lines of code. So we have said that, we have actually kind of upped the way people look at the automotive business and said, if you really want to work with software and if you want to integrate software into vehicles, this is the place to be. One of our process engineers is this diminutive, small-bodied woman who leads a team of 500 men on the shop floor with complete panache and complete discipline, and they really toe the line in terms of who's the boss. So we've done that really well. And she was the first woman on the Chakan plant floor, and she continues to be with us, and she's done a terrific job. The second thing that we have done is to, at entry-level jobs, when it comes to welding, when it comes to painting, when it comes to parts and tools, we have again recruited women, and we have gone to tribal areas where it's needed and got them into contractual jobs and full employment where they are given a role. This alone is not enough, because in the case of factories, you have shifts. So women feel very concerned and families feel very concerned about the second shift. So the woman goes out of the factory at 12 midnight. So we ensure that, there is transport. There is a female security guard who travels with that woman, with the group of women. And the woman is dropped at a point close to her home, because we can't drop every woman at her doorstep. The woman sends an SMS back into the system, and the HR manager looks at all those SMSs in the night to make sure that she has reached her home, and only then she goes off to sleep. So it's a well-created system. We've created comfort rooms, which did not exist, because when you have menstruation, then women really want, a little bit of a break to kind of rest herself. Sanitary pad machines, toilets. Please remember, these factories did not have toilets when they first started. So make sure that the infra is in place, and you have to invest in these aspects to get women into the workforce. I'm quite happy to say that we have almost doubled the number of women on the shop floor in the last 1 year. And that now the workforce, only women on the shop floor, is 15%. It's actually a pretty significant move, where we have to actually go and tell women, come and work with us, and don't feel concerned about coming into a factory which creates automobiles. So it's been a journey. I feel very hopeful when I see people like Anushka Patil on the shop floor. And I completely agree with you about the behavior of men on the shop floor. So whenever there is a woman, one is there are less fights, there's more discipline, and the quality of jobs. So for example, the painting that happens on our cars, they're very high quality finish cars or SUVs, the error rate, so our entire paint line is only women. The quality of the finish, the errors are minimal. That's why you see better quality, you have less errors, the productivity improves, and I think therefore it's a win-win for business. So I could even talk to you about the tractor business, for example. Again, when you think about axles, which are there for tractors, we have trained women to actually, lift those axles and fit them into trucks. And there was a time when they would be like, "Kya main kar sakti hu?" And then, this is a man's job and I can't do heavy lifting. But once they get trained, they are fantastic. So all women assembly lines, only women working fantastically well, no issues on the shop floor, complete discipline, a win-win for business, a win-win for society. So that's our journey.
Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. All it needs is a little bit of a push and the confidence and belief. And I think we can excel, and we are. So that's really, really good. So coming to you, Eittee, what would, from your organization's perspective, your organization has done a lot in this field. So can you tell us a little bit about what is it that you have done and certain specific examples, and also a little more about any challenges that you've faced and overcome?
Thank you so much for that question. And I think I'll bring a slightly different perspective from what Asha just spoke about, because she comes from a manufacturing background. So coming from a service sector and coming from a recruitment and talent company, some of the challenges that we have seen, not only something that cuts across all sectors, is that diversity. It doesn't get the buy-in from all business leaders. Still many a times it's seen as a HR role. Okay, HR is doing a diversity and inclusion workshop. They want to hire X number of people under this vertical. But, it is important. So, and recently, we did 8 roundtables across India, and we came out with a paper. And one of the challenges, that came across almost across all companies was there is no matrices to measure, what the statistics that we all have been talking about, and I'm sure, in the previous panels also it got talked about. We all go to, say, a Harvard Business Review or Credit Suisse, but our organizations mapping it, do they have the toolkits? So it's good to hear individual stories, but, cumulatively, can we say that every organization, my organization, because I had so much more representation from women, or say or say PWD, my output was X percentage higher. That's not available as on date. Secondly, one of the other challenges is that a lot of people these days, are talking about diversity and without, focusing on inclusion. You can have diverse hiring, but, until and unless you have inclusive policies, you can bring women into the workforce, but you need to keep them in the workforce. So, I'll tell you, just give you a small example. One of the big fours, they came to us, and, they wanted to recruit at a senior partner level. And they were, they were neutral, be it a woman or a male, they were not bothered about that. So, for every 20 male CVs we got 1 female CV. So, how do you, talk about parity? So, it's not only, talking about diversity or hiring, it's also about inclusion, creating that ecosystem, creating that infrastructure, bringing that flexibility for the women workforce, to be in the, to be in the workforce for a longer term. They need to be in the, right from the beginning level to the decision-making level. And at Ranstad, we have created policies, and we have created ERGs, mentorship groups, to mentor women to stay in the workforce, because, and we are proud to say that, 48% of our workforce is women employees, and 30% of our leadership workforce is women. So that's something that we take a lot of pride in. And because when policies are being formed, it is important to have that representation from all communities in the policy making process, in the designing phase. So if you all recall, in 2017, when the GST Council was formed and, the tax slabs were getting made, so, what got exempted was, Kajal, Bindi, and Sindoor, but what did not get exempted was the sanitary pads. So, what is more important, and why so? Because there were no female representation on the GST Council, the first meeting that happened. So, I think it is important for us to just not talk about diversity, but be inclusive at the same time. Yeah, so that's my perspective.
There is actually a very interesting survey that was conducted in corporates, and while there was much higher and positive acceptability for diversity, when it actually came to inclusivity and equity, it was actually negative. So it's not that people don't mind hiring diverse teams, but giving equal opportunities to everyone was a question that people were not willing to invest in. And you can't have one without the other. You have to have everything together. So coming to you, Shubhrata, we actually spoke at length about DEI, and it's not just about gender diversity, but it's much, much more. And as an advocate for mental health awareness and in the context of diversity and inclusion, can you share a little more context about how we can look at this much beyond gender parity?
Yeah, thanks, Rita. So we've been talking about this a lot, and I'm going to talk about that segment of the population which does not even get acknowledged, which doesn't form a part of any kind of clique or any pressure group or any advocacy group to even find a mention in the DE&I policies across the world, at least in our context here. So this consists of people who have psychosocial disability, who live with chronic mental health conditions, people who are neurodivergent, and we don't get counted, unfortunately. So we don't get included in any of the diversity and inclusion programs. And so much so that the stigma around mental health, mental disorders, even neurodivergence is so much, and the awareness is so low that people like us, we go on masking our entire lives. And ultimately what happens is that it leads to early burnout. Even the most brilliant person with ADHD will flame out early. And there is, then of course it also preys on the other aspects of mental health like anxiety. And people do end up sometimes with severe mental illness as well. So this is something that really needs to change. And overall, a change is needed in society, but organizations and businesses could be the leaders here. There is a big opportunity there. Because when you hire employees who are neurodivergent, let's say, or who have mental health conditions, and they are kind of forced to mask, forced to hide, ultimately the stress that places on them, it could lead to, quiet quitting, which is happening very often these days. And then, because the roles that they are playing may not really be playing up to their strengths. So inclusion also should, as previous speaker said, if you're hiring diverse people, or you need to have policies which are more inclusive. So in the case of people with neurodivergence, or let's say someone with a mental health condition, so if you have roles which are matched to what they excel at, that really is beneficial for the organization. Because as I said, quiet quitting is just one of the things that can happen, but it can actually result in the person quitting altogether. So from a human perspective, from the individual's perspective, definitely it's their entire life, and someone who ends up with a major mental health disorder, their life, their entire family, everything gets upended. But also from an organizational perspective, you spend a lot of money on hiring people, on training them to do a certain kind of job. And what happens when this person quits? So you are not getting your money's worth either. So policies which encourage people to open up, to speak out, because as of now, people don't speak up for the very fear of being ostracized, stigmatized. And let us just ask ourselves, how many of us are even aware of the conditions like ADHD and autism? And are there any spaces for people with them? I say this because I am somebody who has ADHD. And I still do my job. I still get up every morning. I go and do my job and come back. And it's the same for every other person who's there, who has some kind of neurodivergence. But are there really inclusive spaces for them? And I think this really needs to be addressed. So we do need to look at diversity and inclusion beyond gender, because this is kind of where it has stayed so far. And this is something that will help organizations, help individuals, and ultimately the goals of society and all the SDGs, everything gets covered there.
I think that's a very, very important point, something that we need to keep in mind as we take that step forward. And I remember when Amrita and I had our first meet for Tap-In in Delhi, and it was a group of 12 to 15 women. The first thing that people said was, we find this a safe and inclusive space to have a conversation. And I think most organizations need to create that environment. I've been lucky to be part of organizations where they've fostered cultures where you find it safe to speak your mind out without repercussions, you know, and that's also the onus on leaders, that you kind of create that environment that no one should feel excluded. Everyone should feel a part of being, you know, included in one community. So I think that's very, very important. And coming to you, Poonam, this is something I think the Lalit Suri group has really, really done well. We know that it's not just about creating policies, but you guys actually walk the talk. So can you take us a bit through what is it that has worked really well and how you kind of gone through this journey?
Right, thank you, Preeta, and a very good afternoon to all of you. Preeta, before I answer your question, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the DEI welcome that we did for all of you before the start of this session. And that DEI welcome was a true representation of all the marginalized communities that we work with at the Lalit. So it could be acid attack survivors, it could be people with disabilities, it could be people having mental health issues, it could be anything, and we all work with them. And I think this is something we are privileged, I would say, that we have a leadership that's extremely supportive, and we have their complete buy-in for something like this, for being a diverse and inclusive organization. And this is something that we totally and completely believe in. It's not in the tick in the box activity for us. It is something that is ingrained in our DNA at the Lalit. And that's also represented in our numbers, that we have representation in the C-suite, in the boardrooms, at the mid-management levels, and even at entry-level positions. So if I was to talk about women leaders, of course, we are an organization headed by Dr. Suri, a pioneering leader who's been a mentor to all of us within the organization and outside. And we also, I'd like to take this opportunity to share that 50% of our corporate leadership is women. And that's something which means that it's walking the talk. It's not just, Dr. Suri has been able to nurture an environment in the organization where she actually is trying to thrive an organization where women and people from various communities prosper, and they bring their authentic self to the workplace. And so that is something that we're doing. And also there's a lot that goes in terms of creating a supportive environment to make this happen. And which means sensitization sessions, which means regular trainings, right from onboarding, trainings around the year to educate people to how to build empathy amongst our various team members in as to how they can work with a diverse team, understanding their needs, creating an infrastructure which is ready for them. So whether we have our gender-neutral toilets, or whether we have places which are accessible to people who are physically who have some kind of a disability or special needs. So we're trying to do all of that, and that's got translated at the workplace.
That's amazing, and we've seen some of it. We've seen Dr. Suri talk about it, and it's really inspirational, because we need more people at leadership taking charge. And I know that change starts when it starts from the top. It doesn't always start at the grassroots level, though we've seen movements which start at the grassroots level, which have become really big. I know you need to run, so before you go, just any last thoughts that you want to talk about how DEI can be truly transformational, especially from a leadership perspective, and it's not something that companies do or say for tokenism, because that can have a spiraling negative effect, right? Where you just say things for the sake of it.
Clearly, time has come when companies have started realizing the potential that women bring, number one. You are choosing from 50% of the talent pool. It makes 100% business sense when you start choosing from 100%. Why do you choose from 50%? That means you'll get just half of what the world has to offer. So that's point number one. And time has come that companies now have started and also will continue to do that. You can't ignore it. Secondly, women's own achievements. You can't ignore a girl who is topping the school or who is topping the board. For how long? I think that is another thing that will force companies now to think in favor of women, because they know that wherever girls take charge, they make a difference. Starting from political leadership of Jacinda Ardern to the Iceland Prime Minister, or Finland Prime Minister, who are not only ready to lead in difficult times, but are also willing to leave when the situation demands, whether it is personal or professional. So that is number two. Thirdly, world is poorer without women's perspective. And that is what I see changing very, very fast. Lastly, what gives me hope is women's voices. You see Iran, you see anywhere in the world, women are not shying away from asking their rights. They are saying, we are there, count us in. You can't design a house at keeping a 5'4" standard in mind. There's a woman who is 5, there's a woman who is 6 feet tall. How can you have the same slab level? And going by what you're saying, women have started to have a voice. And let's not discourage each other from, she's aggressive, she's bitchy, she's this, she's that. Please, let's not be too judgmental about ourselves. We will go through all these processes. We will go through all these routes before we reach where we are destined to and where we actually deserve to reach. So that is the last thing that I would like to say, that a small investment from a company, I'm not saying a huge investment, the travel arrangements for a girl to reach safely in time to the workplace will go a long way. A lunch or a crash at the safe crash for the children would go a long way in retaining women. Lastly, I think it's just a matter of time before, I'm very optimistic and probably all of us should be, it's not very far that women are going to rule the world. Seriously, this century belongs to women, and we people who are sitting here in this room should encourage young women to just identify their spot in the sky and the world and wherever they are. And it's not going to be very far. Thank you so very much. I need to leave.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Sorry, guys. We will be in touch. I'm really sorry about that.
So I'm going to come to you with the same question, Asha. You've been at leadership roles, and how do you see this change coming through from leadership, and how do you make sure that it's not tokenism, but it's genuine, because the more genuine it is, the more the change that we're going to see?
I don't know how many in the room will agree to this point, but I really believe that diversity should not be a target in any organization. I'm not a fan of diversity quotas because I think it does a little bit of a disservice to women, really, especially when she's told that you're a diversity hire. And that, I think, is a gesture of tokenism that, you know, the word diversity hire bothers me a lot. I think we should put the right person on the job, and you know, whether it's a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. But it's a disservice when we actually say, we have a target to fill, and you know how it is with targets. Everybody just sets out to get that target right. You get the acquisition right, you get more women in, but then they don't stay back because you don't have a culture which allows them to stay back. So I think what we need to do is to create an inclusive culture, and I completely agree with what you said, Eittee, with respect to this, because without the culture, diversity has absolutely no meaning. And we'd rather start slowly, ensure we create the right environment, but not fall into the trap of targets and quotas.
I completely agree. I also kind of don't like the word diversity hire. That was one of the things that I do ask when people reach out saying, what is the end goal? Because then you're not setting the person up for success, right? It's meeting a target which is not the right thing to do. I'm going to come to you, Eittee, and then I'm going to come to Poonam before I finally conclude with Shubhrata. From a policy perspective, right? What strategies have you seen that are effective in building strong allyship and, more importantly, support and creating that safe environment?
Thanks, Preeta. And, you know, I would just like to say, I think you only mentioned, you know, let's walk the talk. And today, I just wanted to share with everybody, I don't know if everybody knows this, that my colleague, you know, who heads our APAC DE&I mandate, she was supposed to be a speaker at this panel, but unfortunately, she fell very sick and could not make it today. And she asked me if I would represent her on this panel and fill in for her. And I happily said yes. You know why and how, from where that confidence came to me? Because, you know, I see, you know, inclusion and diversity in everything that we do. You know, it's just not in textbooks for us. And one of the things that has really worked for us, we have created these safe places, you know, within the organization to have these bold conversations. No one, I would say, I would like to believe, and I'm comparatively a new person in Ranstad, but I have seen that people feel very comfortable talking about anything. We have created allyship groups, we have created ERGs, you know, not only focusing on women, but, you know, on mental health, because everything is interrelated, right? So we bring in women, you know, we ask women if they are comfortable to come forward, share their stories, inspire others, you know, single moms, you know, people, you know, single individuals who have been working. So this gives confidence to other people as well, you know, they become inspirational stories. And Ranstad, you know, when it comes to policies, and I think, you know, we have one of the progressive organizations which has very inclusive policies. So being a woman, you know, I have a 4.5-year-old kid. So Ranstad gives me that flexibility. I only have to go to work once a week. So we have continued that post-COVID because we felt that, you know, our output, our productivity was rather enhanced. It was not going down. It was enhanced when we provided that flexibility to our workforce, almost 50% of which is women, right? So, and then, you know, if I have to clock in, say, you know, 8 to 9 hours a day, I can even do that in a staggered way. So, you know, the times which are more comfortable for me to work, I can start working early in the morning, or I can clock in, you know, late hours. So, you know, I think that understanding on the part of the organization that I need that flexibility, that is creating that inclusive workplace, right? So that really works for me. A few other things, you know, that have worked, small things, like, you know, when I joined Ranstad, and I think this training is given to across one and every person in Ranstad, you know, there's a very interesting video that they have created on inclusion, and at the end of that, there's a simple quiz that you have to take just to, you know, reinforce that in your mind. So just to give you an example, like, you know, when a manager, so of course, you know, if I am asking my team, would you like to go out for a lunch? Let's, you know, let's catch up for a drink. So, you know, if there is another member on my team who has a 2-year-old kid, I need to be inclusive. I need to ask, are you okay? Let's go out for lunch. Let's not, make it a late night dinner. So, that's being inclusive. And that is something that we are, kind of, encouraged to think. So I think small things like these, even in our email signatures, even if my CEO sends me a mail, we have to say that, we promote work, home balance, we focus on balanced life, and you're not supposed to answer to any email that comes to in your inbox after 7 p.m. If you do, that's up to you, that's a personal choice, but nobody's expecting you to reply. Even our global CEO is not expecting me to reply to that mail, then and, just because it has come from somebody very senior. So I think all those things make my workplace very inclusive, and that's something why I see a lot of women have stayed back for long duration in Randstad.
I think that culture of inclusivity is extremely critical and important. And like I said, it starts with small things, and we may think they're small, but actually they can be hugely impactful for people. And the other thing which came from the previous panel also, all these policies are across the board, right? It's not just for women. And now, because you have them across the board, every person feels inclusive. So it's not just about one individual or one particular gender, but it's every individual in the organization that feels included. So, yeah.
Add one point there, Preeta, when we talk of flexibility and hybrid workspaces, I think we have to also be very mindful, because, sometimes it should not happen, because, men, they have a, comparatively, they have a lesser role to play in a household. I would say, still we are not yet there. So, there should be mechanisms to track the output and productivity of employees. It should not be that somebody's in office 5 days a week gets, just because of higher visibility, they should not get higher rewards. It should always be dependent on the productivity and the output of that person.
Presence is not equal to productivity. That's true. Poonam, how have you seen allyship work in your organization? I know you have a lot that you have created in terms of inclusive and safe spaces. So how do you foster allyship and employee engagement to kind of take this forward?
Right. I think having a diverse workforce has helped us in having a more engaged workforce as well. We've done things like empathy building. So, we have people from various communities that work with us. And we do various sessions in-house and within the organization, wherein they share their stories and their journeys. What are the hardships? What are the challenges that they've experienced? And I think that builds a lot of empathy amongst our other team members, and they kind of align to their thought process, and they kind of embrace more when they hear about their challenges and how did they overcome them. So I think empathy building is something that's very, very important, and we do that at all levels and across our hotels, within the organization, and that is something that's been very successful. And in terms of building allyship, we do various outreach programs with extended communities that we work with. So, so we may go out to NGOs, we work with wherever we have a presence in any of our hotels in those cities. We work with shelter homes, we work with people from where the LGBTQ community, acid attack survivors, people with disability. So, whether it's the National Bharat Olympics that we were we've sent out our teams to, and so these are various programs through which we've kind of built in that extended empathy, and our teams feel that we support and sponsor them, and there is get their buy-in. So I think all these initiatives have helped us in a long way.
That's amazing and inspiring in many ways. Before we move to audience questions, Shubhrata, how do you look at it from a neurodivergent or from a mental health perspective? How do you build those safe, inclusive spaces?
So here I'd just like to conclude with couple of perspectives to this problem of creating safe and inclusive spaces. First, of course, is the issue of safety. You know, the safe space really needs to be safe. Like a person, suppose somebody has depression. So if they speak up, they should really be assured that it's a safe space because of the stigma, because of, there's always this thing at the back of the mind that, okay, I'm speaking here thinking that this is a safe space, but who knows, sometime later this might come back to bite me. So this is something that organizations need to keep in mind, that if it is safe, do make the person feel empowered and safe enough to speak. The second is the rights-based approach to mental health and neurodiversity. Somehow, it's been my experience, and of course, I may not, I don't speak for everyone, but I've generally seen that all interventions and all accommodations that are provided to people with psychosocial disability, they come from a place of charity. And mental illness is seen as a moral failing, a personal failing, a choice, and therefore, even if someone is being a little accommodative, it is always from a place that, you know, I'm a nice person, this person has a problem, let me just help them. I have not really seen this coming from a place of right, that as a person with a mental illness or with psychosocial disability, I have rights guaranteed by, like right now we have a very progressive Mental Health Care Act, as well as the Rights of People with Disabilities Act. These two acts are the cornerstones of, you know, all the rights that are given to people with mental health and issues and so psychosocial disability. So this has to be highlighted more and more. Organizations need to look at these two acts, and all the accommodation that has to be provided should come from this place of, you know, this person has rights, and not just because we are good and we are charitable. This is not charity. I mean, nobody works for charity. I mean, people work, right? People work. So these are the two things that I think really need to be taken up. Thank you.
That's actually quite profound, because the moment people perceive that this is not coming from the right place, then it's not going to be effective at all.